Your Honor, the simple truth is that she is a compulsive liar. She's poisoning our son's mind against me, and I fear for his emotional safety. The words, spoken by my ex-husband, Marcus, were smooth, polished, and delivered with a look of earnest concern. They landed in the silent courtroom and hung there, twisting the air out of my lungs. He painted me as a monster, with the same calm confidence he once used to sell luxury cars. And the judge, a woman with tired eyes and an unreadable expression, looked as though she was buying it. I wanted to scream, to object, to claw the lies out of the air. But my voice was gone, trapped somewhere in my throat behind a wall of shock and terror. I was frozen, my hands gripping the slick wood of the chair, while the man who had once promised to protect me methodically dismantled me in front of our son. Leo sat just behind me, his small hand tucked into my mother's. He's only 8, but he has always been an old soul, and I could feel his wide, serious eyes on the back of my head, watching me drown. Before the courtroom, before the tailored suits and the carefully constructed falsehoods, there was just us. Our life was small and contained within the walls of a 2-bedroom apartment with floors that sighed every time you walked on them. Leo called it our fortress. His bedroom was a universe of his own making, filled with drawings of fantastical creatures and Lego spaceships. I worked from home as a freelance editor, a job that allowed me to be there when he got off the school bus, a job that paid just enough to keep the lights on and our fortress standing. My mother, Eleanor, lived 10 minutes away, a constant, grounding presence, who would show up with homemade soup and quiet reassurance, telling me, "You're a better storyteller than he is. Clara, just remember your truth." Our most sacred ritual was the story box. It was an old shoebox Leo had decorated with glitter and pictures of dragons. I'd started it after Marcus first left, telling Leo that any feeling too big or too confusing to say out loud could be turned into a story and put in the box. Every night, we'd read one. Some were whimsical tales of talking squirrels. Others were heavier. One drawing showed a small stick figure with a huge, jagged hole in his chest. The caption read, "The boy whose dad lives in a different castle." We talked about that one for a long time. I always told him the truth, no matter how much it ached. The divorce had been a war of attrition. Marcus agreed to joint custody, but he used his time with Leo as a weapon. He questioned every decision I made, from Leo's diet to his bedtime. After his weekends, Leo would return to me like a ship lost in a fog, quiet and distant, often not speaking a full sentence until Tuesday. Marcus was a master of a specific kind of cruelty. A few months ago, he'd bought Leo a ridiculously expensive robotics kit, something I could never afford. Leo came home, his face a mixture of excitement and guilt. "Dad said," he began, looking at the floor, "that maybe if you loved me more, you'd get me good stuff too." The words were a poisoned dart, aimed at me, but passing straight through our son. I documented it, all the passive-aggressive emails, the texts where he called me unhinged for disagreeing with him, the pattern of Leo's withdrawal. I had a digital folder overflowing with evidence, a chronicle of his campaign to erode my confidence and my relationship with my son, but I never showed any of it to Leo. I thought I was protecting him by absorbing the blows myself. One evening, after a tense drop-off where Marcus had criticized my car in front of Leo, our son was quieter than usual. As I tucked him into bed, he looked at me and asked, "Mom, is it bad that I feel scared when Dad gets that shiny look in his eyes?" My heart stopped. "I think I'm not supposed to say it," he whispered, turning his face into the pillow. That was the night I realized my silence wasn't protecting him. It was teaching him to be silent. 2. A few weeks later, the papers arrived. Marcus was filing for sole custody. His motion was a work of fiction, citing my emotional instability and erratic behavior as a danger to our son. He claimed I was actively alienating him, lying to Leo about him, and that I couldn't provide a stable home. Reading his lawyer's words, I felt the floor drop out from under me. My own attorney, a man who seemed more concerned with procedure than with passion, advised a strategy of calm defense. Don't get emotional. Clara, don't interrupt. Let them say their piece. The judge won't respond well to hysterics. Hysterics. The word felt like a cage. Inside, I was a storm of fury and grief. But on the outside, I was being told to be a gentle rain. Leo saw the shift in me. He saw the nights I spent at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, my face pale in the glow of my laptop. He saw the tears I tried to hide. He was only 8, but he was watching. He was listening, and unbeknownst to me, he was beginning to craft a story of his own. The morning of the hearing, the city was shrouded in a cold, persistent drizzle that mirrored the dread in my own heart. Eleanor came with us, a silent pillar of strength in her Sunday best coat. Leo was quiet in the back seat, his school tablet clutched in his lap. Its screen dark. He wore his favorite sweater, a soft blue one, and he seemed to be trying to make himself as small as possible. When we entered the courthouse, a grand, intimidating building of marble and echoing silence, Marcus was already there. He stood beside his lawyer, looking impeccable in a charcoal gray suit, the picture of calm authority. He saw us and gave a small, sad smile, as if we were all victims of my unfortunate instability. Leo didn't look at him. He just pressed closer to my side. The courtroom itself felt like a stage set for a tragedy. The dark wood, the stern flags, the elevated judge's bench, it was all designed to make a person feel small and insignificant. And it was working. Marcus's lawyer began, his voice a smooth, confident, pure. He laid out his case with chilling precision, presenting text messages I'd sent Marcus in moments of desperation, now stripped of all context and displayed on a large screen for the judge to see. There was one from a sleepless night where I'd written, "I'm so overwhelmed. I feel like I'm failing." He framed it not as a cry for help from an exhausted single mother, but as an admission of mental incompetence. There was another where I'd pleaded, "Please don't speak to me like that in front of Leo." This was twisted into proof of my attempts to control his access and alienate him from his son. I watched as the architecture of my life was dismantled and rebuilt into a narrative of ruin. I was no longer a mother trying her best. I was a volatile, manipulative woman on the verge of a breakdown. Then Marcus took the stand. He was magnificent in his performance. He spoke of his love for Leo, his voice thick with a carefully rehearsed sincerity. He recounted instances where he had tried to co-parent, only to be met with my hostility and paranoia. Then, he turned his gaze slightly, and for a fraction of a second, his eyes met Leo's. I saw it then a flicker, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor in his composure. A shadow of something shame-guilt crossed his face before a mask of paternal concern slid back into place. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. But I saw it. He knew he was lying. "Your Honor," he said, his voice now resonating with false gravitas. "I am not doing this to punish Clara. I am doing this to protect my son. I believe he is in an emotionally harmful environment, and I can provide the stability he needs and deserves. Protect him." The word was a lit match in a room full of gasoline. The judge, Judge Miller, turned her impassive gaze to me. "Ms. Evans," she said, her voice flat. "Do you have a response?" This was my moment. My lawyer had prepped me. Be concise. Be calm. Stick to the facts. But the facts felt a million miles away. All I had were the feelings, a tidal wave of them. The years of quiet insults. The gaslighting. The slow, methodical erosion of my self-worth. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I should have left sooner. I should have seen this coming. I should have protected him better. And beneath the guilt was a white-hot rage. a scream that was clawing its way up my throat. But my lawyer's words echoed in my head. Don't get emotional. Don't be hysterical. The conflict was a war inside me. The need to scream, fighting the command to be silent. The result was a devastating stalemate. My body chose neither. It simply shut down. I opened my mouth, but only a strangled gasp came out. My hands, hidden beneath the table, were shaking violently. I could feel the judge's patience wearing thin. I could feel Marcus's triumphant stare boring into me. I was failing. Right here. Right now. With everything on the line. I was proving him right. I was the hysterical, unstable woman he described. So broken I couldn't even speak. My lawyer cleared his throat, about to offer some weak, procedural statement in my place. I looked away from the judge, my eyes finding Leo. He was looking right at me, and his expression wasn't one of disappointment. It was one of resolve, as if my silence was the cue he had been waiting for. He let go of Eleanor's hand, slid off the high bench, and stood, his small voice, impossibly clear and steady, cut through the suffocating silence of the room. Your Honor, he said, I have a recording on my tablet I think you should hear. For a heartbeat. The room was suspended in disbelief. Then, chaos erupted. Marcus's lawyer shot to his feet, his voice booming with manufactured outrage. Objection. Your Honor, this is an absolute circus. The child has clearly been coached by his mother in a desperate, last-ditch attempt to manipulate these proceedings. We cannot allow a minor to be used as a pawn in this manner. He was loud, aggressive, and for a terrifying second, I thought it would work. I saw a flicker of doubt in Judge Miller's eyes. My own lawyer started to rise, looking flustered and unprepared for this turn of events. Marcus, regaining his composure, shook his head sadly, a look of profound disappointment on his face, as if to say, see what I have to deal with. But Leo didn't flinch. He just stood there, his small shoulders squared, his gaze locked on the judge. He was an island of stillness in a sea of turmoil. Judge Miller looked from the sputtering lawyer to Marcus's pitying expression, and then to my son. She held up a hand, silencing the room with a single, sharp gesture. The objection is noted, and it is overruled, she said, her voice devoid of emotion, but laced with an undeniable finality. I will hear it. She motioned to the bailiff. Please bring the tablet to the bench. The bailiff, a large man with a gentle face, walked over to Leo and took the tablet as if handling something precious. He placed it before the judge. The silence that fell now was different. It was electric with anticipation. I watched Marcus's face, saw the color begin to drain from it, leaving a pale, waxy sheen. His lawyer sat down, his mouth a thin, hard line. The judge tapped the screen. For a moment, there was just static, a faint, hissing sound. Then, a clatter, like a fork hitting a plate. And then, his voice. Marcus' voice. But it wasn't the smooth, reasonable tone he'd used in court. This was him unfiltered, raw and jagged with rage. You think this is a game? His voice snarled through the tiny speakers. Distorted, but unmistakable. You think you can run to her and tell your little stories? Your mother is a wreck. She can't even take care of herself, let alone you. Do you have any idea what will happen if you keep this up? There was a pause. And then Leo's voice, small and trembling. I just miss her. The sound of my son's fear was a physical blow. Marcus's response was a harsh, bitter laugh. Miss her. You should be thanking me for getting you away from that crazy woman. You say one more word about this, one more lie, and I swear I will make sure she never sees you again. You understand me. You will live with me, and you will do exactly as I say. Then came the moment that changed everything. After the torrent of threats, there was a sudden, Heavy silence on the recording, broken only by a single, ragged sound. Marcus, letting out a deep, shuddering sigh. It was a sound of utter exhaustion, of self-loathing. The sound of a man momentarily seeing the monster he had become before shoving it back down into the darkness. A second later, the rage returned. Now go to your room. I don't want to look at you. The judge hit pause. She didn't look up. She just stared at the dark screen. The courtroom was a tomb. Marcus was ashen, his mask of composure completely shattered. He opened his mouth, his voice suddenly strained and desperate. Your Honor, that is taken completely out of context. I was disciplining him. It was a difficult moment. And enough. Judge Millersil. The word wasn't shouted, but it cracked through the room like a whip, silencing him instantly. She finally lifted her head, and for the first time, the weariness in her eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fire. She looked directly at Leo, who had not moved, and her voice softened for the first time all day. Thank you for being so brave. Leo, she said, you may return to your seat now. Leo walked back to my mother, his steps slow, the adrenaline now leaving him. Eleanor pulled him into her lap, wrapping her arms around him like a shield. The judge's gaze then fell on me, then shifted to Marcus, her expression hardening into granite. In light of this new and deeply disturbing evidence, the court is issuing an emergency order, effective immediately. Full, temporary, physical, and legal custody of the minor child, Leo Evans, is granted to his mother, Ms. Clara Evans. Mr. Thorne, she said, using his last name with clinical disdain. Your visitation rights are hereby suspended, pending a full psychological evaluation. Supervised contact only will be considered after the court reviews that report. Bailiff, please escort Mr. Thorne from my courtroom. Marcus stood, stunned into silence, his face a canvas of disbelief and fury. You can't, he started. Sir, the bailiff said, stepping forward. For a moment, it looked like Marcus might fight. It might unleash the rage from the recording right there. But then he seemed to deflate. The performance over, the man underneath exposed, he turned and walked out of the courtroom, his lawyer trailing behind him like a shadow. The courtroom emptied around us, the sounds of shuffling feet and hushed whispers fading until only the three of us remained, suspended in the echoing silence. It felt like the air after a violent storm, strangely calm and clean. I finally stood, my legs unsteady, and walked the few steps to where Leo was still cradled in my mother's arms. I knelt before them, and Leo slid from his grandmother's lap into mine. He didn't say anything, just buried his face in my shoulder. And I held him, rocking him gently, my hand stroking his soft hair. The weight of his small body was the most real and grounding thing in the world. I could feel the tension leaving him, the rigid bravery dissolving back into the tender vulnerability of a child. He had carried a burden far too heavy for him. And now, finally, he could set it down. As we walked out of the courthouse and into the cleansing rain, I knelt in front of him again on the wide, wet steps. Are you okay? I asked, my hands resting on his arms. He shrugged, looking at his worn sneakers. Then he met my eyes. I didn't want to do it. Mom, he said, his voice barely audible over the patter of the rain. I was really scared, but I had to. I know, I said, my throat tight. I am so proud of you. You should never have had to carry that alone. A tear escaped and traced a path down his cheek. I didn't know if she would believe me. She did, I whispered, pulling him into another hug. She believed you because you told the truth, and you were strong enough to speak it when no one else could. That afternoon, we went to Eleanor's house, a sanctuary of warm soup and unspoken understanding. while my mother stirred a pot on the stove, creating something warm to combat the chill that had settled deep in our bones. Leo sat at the kitchen table with his crayons. After a while, he brought me his drawing. It was a picture of a small boy standing on a hill, shouting into a valley. From his mouth came a series of lines that traveled across the page and made the flowers in the valley grow taller. Underneath, in his determined, uneven script, and he had written, "Truth has a voice." I cried then. Not the silent, terrified tears of the courtroom, but a flood of hot, cleansing relief. The pain was finally finding its exit. The final custody hearing took place 4 weeks later. It was a formality. Really, the court-appointed psychologist who evaluated Marcus had filed a damning report, outlining his controlling behaviors, narcissistic tendencies, and a profound lack of empathy for the child's emotional state. The recording had opened the door, and the professional evaluation had laid bare the truth of what was inside. Marcus was there, but he seemed smaller, deflated. The charm was gone, replaced by a sullen resentment. The judge read her final decision with a swift finality. I was granted sole physical and legal custody. Marcus would be permitted supervised visits twice a month at a family therapy center, contingent on him completing an anger management program. The illusion he had so carefully crafted was shattered forever. In the months that followed, we began the slow, quiet work of healing. I started therapy again, not because I was broken, but because I was finally ready to put myself back together. I realized I had spent years learning how to survive Marcus, and I needed to learn how to live without the constant threat of him. I needed to learn how to feel safe again in my own life. Leo's drawings changed. The stormy skies were replaced by suns with smiling faces. The houses now had windows with curtains and little stick figures waving from inside. We kept using the story box. One evening, I pulled out a folded piece of paper. The note inside asked, "Can kids protect grown-ups too?" I looked over at him, sitting on his bed in his pajamas, his face serious in the lamplight. "Yes," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You did. You protected us both." I tell this story for every person who has ever been silenced, for every woman who has been called crazy or unstable by the very person who caused her pain. I tell it because the truth can feel small and fragile when you're up against a confident lie. But it has a weight and a power all its own. I used to believe that being a good mother meant shielding my son from all the sharp edges of the world. Now I know that's impossible. A good mother teaches her child that the world has sharp edges, but that he has a voice sharp enough to cut through the darkness. She teaches him to tell the truth. Even when his voice shakes, we still have our hard days, but they are ours to navigate together. We are not the scared, silent versions of ourselves that Marcus tried to trap us in. We are free. My son didn't just bring a recording into that courtroom. He brought the light. And he taught me that sometimes the most powerful story isn't the one you write or edit. It's the one you have the courage to tell out loud. If you are still here, thank you for listening. This story was not an easy one to live. And it's not an easy one to tell. But I know that somewhere out there, someone is sitting in a silence that feels unbearable, wondering if their truth is enough. If this was you, I hope it helps you feel a little less alone. If our story moved you, please like the video and share it with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters. And in the comments, I invite you to share a piece of your own story. Tell us about a time you spoke up, or a time someone spoke up for you. Those stories create a light for others to find their way. For more real stories from the heart, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for being here. Stay brave, and never, ever forget that your truth has a voice.